They found his teeth before they found his name. In the alley behind D'Angelo's, blood pooled beneath a man's open mouth, staining the morning frost. Jimmy Russo, 37, enforcer for the Mancini family, lay broken in the shadow of the dumpster, one hand twisted behind his back, his suit shredded and slick with red. Someone had sent a message. This was no random killing. Detective Harris said, "Nobody dumps a body here unless they want the world to see." The street was silent, except for the slow drip of blood into the gutter. Above, old neon flickered, casting green ghosts across Jimmy's ruined face. The city never mourns, it only remembers. Carla Mancini, 26, watched from behind a cracked window, her heart pounding. Her brother was gone. She pressed her palm to the cold glass, whispering, "You promised me, Jimmy. You promised you'd walk away." The sirens grew closer, slicing through dawn. Somewhere, someone lit a cigarette, hands shaking. The mob's most violent soldier was dead, and nothing would be the same. Beneath the city's frozen skin, the war had begun, silent but certain, and everyone would bleed. Beneath the harsh lights of the precinct, Detective Harris reviewed the evidence. Jimmy Russo's file was thick: assaults, debts, blood feuds. Harris flipped through mugshots, each one a record of violence and regret. "They wanted him dead for a reason," Harris muttered, eyes shadowed by years of city rot. The city outside seemed immune to tragedy, rain streaking down black windows. In another room, Carla sat alone, silent and shaking, her brother's death still too fresh to understand. She tried to remember his voice, soft when he spoke to her, hard when he dealt with anyone else. The room's silence was broken only by the ticking clock and the distant wail of sirens, relentless as grief. In the pit of her stomach, Carla felt the first stirrings of rage. This wasn't just a murder. This was a message. Harris stood by the evidence board, photos and strings forming a web that stretched across the city's darkest corners. He knew tonight was just the beginning. Carla remembered the last time she saw Jimmy alive. He had hugged her tightly, promising he was finished with violence. "I'm done, Carla," he whispered. "For you." But the city didn't let anyone walk away. That memory replayed in her mind, the warmth of his arms now a cruel echo. She walked the apartment, floorboards creaking, clutching the jacket he left behind. Each object in the room became a memory: his watch on the dresser, a blood-stained dollar bill, a photo of them as children. The city outside rumbled, indifferent. Carla whispered, "You lied, Jimmy. You always lied." Her fingers tightened around the jacket, knuckles white. Rage bloomed in her chest. She looked out at the city lights, knowing nothing would ever be the same. News of Jimmy's death traveled fast. In the back of Vito's bar, men spoke in hushed tones. Frankie Morales, mid-30s, Cuban-American, lowered his voice. "Nobody hits a Mancini enforcer and lives." Glasses clinked, eyes darted. Rumors spun. Who ordered it? Who benefited? The old bartender wiped down the counter, knuckles pale, pretending not to listen. Every patron seemed a suspect, every shadow held a secret. Outside, headlights crawled by, rain slicking the street. Frankie clenched his fist, jaw set. "We find out who did this," he vowed. The code demanded vengeance. In the corner, a younger man scribbled names on a napkin, fear in every stroke. The bar felt smaller, the air heavy with the threat of violence. By midnight, the streets were hunting grounds. Every corner watched. Every phone buzzed with rumors. Carla stepped out, breath rising in clouds. She moved quickly, head down, her mind a storm. Somewhere a car door slammed, echoing like a threat. Carla turned, catching a glimpse of someone in a dark coat watching her from across the street. Her pulse quickened. She walked faster, boots splashing through puddles, Jimmy's jacket clutched close. The city's heart beat with menace and memory. Somewhere in the distance, a siren screamed, then fell silent. Carla whispered, "You can't scare me, not tonight." But the fear followed, heavy as the night itself. Carla sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a chipped mug of coffee gone cold. Her mother, Maria Mancini, 60, Italian-American, moved quietly in the background, eyes swollen and voice empty. Maria said, "He was always stubborn, your brother. He never listened." The hum of the refrigerator was the only answer. Carla stared at the family photo taped to the fridge. Jimmy, smiling, arms draped around his mother and sister. Now the kitchen felt haunted, every shadow heavy with absence. Maria dropped a spoon, flinching as it clattered, nerves shredded by loss. Carla finally spoke. "Did you know he was in trouble again?" Maria shook her head, tears streaking her cheeks. "He tried to shield us. He thought if he took all the pain, we could be safe." Carla looked down, nails digging into her palm, rage and guilt fighting inside her chest. Outside, winter sunlight struggled through dirty glass, illuminating dust motes like ghosts. The city moved on, but their world had frozen. The pain felt endless, every memory a wound that would not close. In a church with crack-stained glass, Father O'Malley, 70, Irish-American, stood at the altar as Carla entered, steps hesitant. Her breath hung in the cold, her eyes fixed on the candles flickering beneath the crucifix. Father O'Malley said, "You're not alone, child." Carla knelt, her voice a whisper. "I don't know how to forgive. He promised me he'd stop." The priest's face was a map of old pain and hard-won peace. "Sometimes the world asks too much of us," he said. Carla's shoulders shook as she stared at the marble floor. "What if I want to hurt whoever did this?" The priest gently replied, "Vengeance is a poison. You must decide who you want to become." The church was empty, the city's noise a distant echo. Stained glass threw fractured light across Carla's face, reared blue gold, illuminating the tears she could no longer hide. The scent of melted wax and old wood filled the air, a sanctuary for sorrow, if not for peace. Detective Harris reviewed surveillance footage, eyes narrowed and jaw tense. The precinct buzzed behind him, but he was locked in. Jimmy's last hours played on repeat, entering D'Angelo's, talking to a shadowy figure, tension in every step. Harris pressed pause, studied the grainy image. The figure wore a long coat, face hidden. Harris muttered, somebody knew he'd be alone. His partner, Lisa Gomez, 30s, Hispanic-American, leaned over. "You think this was personal?" Harris nodded. "This wasn't business. This was hate." On the desk, evidence bags waited. Jimmy's watch, a torn shirt, a blood-streaked phone. Harris scribbled notes, mind racing. "We need to find out who else was in that alley." The city outside was a maze of secrets, every alley another dead end. Lisa said, "We'll need help from the inside." Harris only grunted, his eyes never leaving the ghostly figure on the screen, his resolve hardening with every passing second. Frankie Morales waited in his dim apartment, blinds drawn tight. He loaded his revolver, hands steady despite the chaos outside. Frankie's phone vibrated, an anonymous text, "You're next." He let out a low curse, memories of Jimmy's loyalty flashing through his mind. Frankie had always been the crew's steady hand, the one who talked first, shot second. Now trust was gone. Frankie stood at his window, watching the street below. Every car looked suspicious, every stranger a threat. He thought of his own mother back in Havana, her warnings echoing, "The streets take everything." Frankie said to himself, "Not this time." His jaw clenched as he stuffed the gun into his jacket. Tonight he would find answers or fall trying. Shadows flickered across the walls as sirens wailed in the distance, the city's promise that blood would bring more blood. Maria Mancini sat alone in her bedroom, framed photos on the dresser and prayer beads tangled in her fingers. Her husband's empty chair beside the window, a silent monument to a different loss. Maria whispered prayers, but her voice broke on Jimmy's name. She remembered his laughter, his stubborn charm, his promise to keep Carla safe. Now grief pressed on her chest like a weight she could not lift. She traced the lines of a faded wedding photo, her husband's eyes bright, her own younger and unafraid. Outside, the city's sirens rose and fell, a lullaby for the broken. Maria closed her eyes and let the tears come, unashamed and endless. Her faith was a flickering candle, hopeful but battered by the wind. The world outside was full of enemies, but inside these walls, only memory remained. Rain hammered the city, turning every alley into a river of grime. Carla Mancini drove through the storm, knuckles white on the steering wheel, Jimmy's jacket draped over her shoulders. Frankie Morales called, "Meet me at the warehouse, it's bad." Headlights cut through sheets of water, every shadow a threat. Carla's mind raced with possibilities: who had betrayed her family, who would benefit most from Jimmy's death. Tires screeched as she pulled into the lot, heart pounding. Frankie waited, soaked and tense, gun hidden under his coat. Carla stepped out, face set with determination. "Tell me the truth, Frankie. Was Jimmy working with someone?" Frankie hesitated, eyes darting. He was scared, Carla. He thought someone inside was leaking information. Lightning flashed, illuminating Carla's fear and fury. She snapped, "Who? Give me a name." Frankie shook his head, raindrops trailing down his cheek. "I don't know, but someone's feeding the cops, and maybe worse." In that moment, Carla knew trust was a luxury she could no longer afford. Inside the warehouse, shadows stretched along cracked concrete. Wooden crates lined the walls, forgotten relics from another era. Frankie wiped water from his face, voice low. "Jimmy," said. There were eyes everywhere, even in his own crew. Carla paced, boots echoing. "We have to find out who's talking, before they come for us." The tension was thick, the air laced with the scent of oil and fear. Frankie pulled out his phone, scrolling through encrypted messages, jaw clenched. "You trust anyone, Carla?" She shook her head, hair dripping, voice hard. "Not anymore." Rain beat against the tin roof, thunder shaking the building. Frankie's gaze was sharp. "We make a move now, or we die waiting." Carla stared at the exit, pulse racing. The world outside was a trap, but inside, betrayal felt closer. Every shadow seemed to move. Somewhere, a rat scurried, unseen but ever present, just like the threat that hunted them. Detective Harris drove through the city's maze, mind racing with fragments of evidence. Lisa Gomez rode beside him, scanning files. Harris said, "Jimmy wasn't killed by rivals. This was someone close." Lisa replied, "Maybe someone on Mancini's payroll?" Headlights illuminated rain-slick streets, sirens distant but ever present. Harris's phone buzzed, an anonymous tip, "Look at Frankie Morales." He frowned, voice grim. "It's always the friend, isn't it?" Lisa shook her head. "Or the family." They pulled up to a diner, windows fogged with warmth against the storm. Harris sipped bitter coffee, watching Carla's reflection as she hurried past, lost in her own world. "She's not safe," Lisa said. "None of them are." Harris leaned forward, determination sharpening his features. "If someone's leaking inside info, we flush them out. No more bodies." Rain tapped on the glass, a soft warning that time was running out for everyone caught in the crossfire. Word spread fast through the underworld. Jimmy's death had shattered old alliances. At Rocco's pool hall, men gathered in tight clusters, arguments flaring. Vinny Russo, 40s, Italian-American, cousin to Jimmy, slammed his cue against the table. "We find the rat, or we're next." The room was thick with smoke and suspicion. Frankie Morales entered, all eyes on him, tension electrifying the air. A younger thug whispered, "He's the one Jimmy trusted." Frankie glared, "You got something to say?" Silence, then Vinny stepped forward, voice hard as stone. "You bring trouble, Frankie. Who else is working with you?" The clatter of pool balls was the only answer. Frankie's jaw tightened as he scanned the room, reading every twitch and shadow. In this world, loyalty was currency, and tonight, everyone's debts were due. Back in her apartment, Carla locked the door, heart thudding. She sank to the floor, Jimmy's jacket clutched to her chest, replaying his last words. "You have to be stronger than me," he had said, voice trembling. Outside, thunder rolled, shaking window panes. Carla's phone buzzed with a hidden number, just static and heavy breathing. She dropped it, panic rising. In the hallway, footsteps paused at her door, then moved on. Carla whispered, "I won't break. Not for them." She got up, wiping her tears, eyes steel. Every inch of the apartment felt dangerous, but she would not run. She rummaged through drawers, pulling out Jimmy's old pistol, hands shaking only for a moment. As lightning split the sky, Carla stared into the mirror, resolve hardening. Tonight she was no one's victim. The phone rang in the dead silence of Carla's apartment, sharp and sudden. She froze, fingers hovering over the receiver. The voice on the other end was cold, almost mocking. "You think you know loyalty? You don't know anything." It was a whisper, a breath, then silence. Carla's heart pounded as realization struck. Someone close had betrayed Jimmy. Someone she never suspected. She paced, eyes darting to the locked drawer where Jimmy's pistol rested. "Under the line, I'll do a cell." The weight of years of trust shattered in a moment. Frankie's text flashed on her screen. "Meet me. Urgent." But she hesitated. Betrayal cut deeper than any bullet. The city seemed darker now, streets less safe. Carla whispered, "Who did this to us?" Her own voice felt foreign. Somewhere outside, sirens wailed, a warning or an omen, she couldn't tell. The shadow of a friend had become the dagger in her back. At an unmarked warehouse, Frankie waited, muscles taut, eyes sharp as a hawk's. He paced as a figure approached. Salvatore Sal Leone, 45, male, Italian-American, slick and dangerous, Jimmy's closest friend turned enemy. Sal's voice was smooth but venomous. Jimmy's death wasn't a mistake. It was a message. From within. Frankie's jaw clenched. "You're the rat." Sal smiled coldly. "I'm the future." The rain outside hammered against the metal roof, drowning their words. Frankie pulled his gun, voice low and steady. "You betrayed the family. You'll pay." Sal laughed, unafraid, shadows flickering behind him. "The family's dead. Only power remains." The old bonds broke like glass between them. The storm outside mirrored the storm inside, their friendship bleeding into hatred, trust collapsing under the weight of secrets and lies. Detective Harris sat behind his desk, reviewing phone records and intercepted messages. His face was grave as he uncovered a web of lies linking Salvatore Leone to corrupt officers and rival gangs. Harris said, "This goes deeper than we thought. Someone from the inside sold Jimmy out." Lisa Gomez leaned over whispering, "We need to move fast. Sal's planning something big." Harris nodded grimly. "We're the only ones who can stop this before more blood spills." Outside, the city lights flickered, rain slicking the streets. Harris clenched his fists, eyes burning with determination. It's time to bring the devil into the light. Every hour lost was another chance for Sal to tighten his grip. Harris stood, grabbing his coat. "Let's end this." Carla met Frankie in a shadowed alley beneath flickering street lamps. Her eyes burned with betrayal and sorrow. "Salvatore, he was like a brother to Jimmy," she said, voice cracking. Frankie spat. "He sold us out for a cut and a throne. He's playing us all." Carla shook her head. "We trusted him." Frankie's grip tightened around his gun. "Trust's a luxury we can't afford anymore." The rain began falling again, cold and unforgiving. The city around them pulsed with menace. Carla swallowed hard, making a silent vow. "No more victims. We end this tonight." Frankie nodded, eyes dark but resolute. Their fractured family had one last chance, to survive, or be consumed by the very darkness they fought. The final confrontation was inevitable. In a deserted dockyard, crates stacked like tombstones, Salvatore waited, flanked by armed men. Carla and Frankie approached, guns drawn, hearts pounding. Sal sneered, "You're too late. The Mancini Empire dies tonight." Carla's voice was steady. "Not if we stop you." Bullets shattered the night as chaos erupted, echoing off cold steel. Frankie moved like a storm, Carla steady and fierce. Sal's men faltered, surprise turning to desperation. Amid the gunfire, Carla caught Sal's eye, years of betrayal flashing between them. Then silence, broken only by heavy breathing and rain. Sal lay defeated, his empire crumbling. Carla stood over him, cold fury and sorrow mingling. You lost more than a war. You lost your soul. The city held its breath, the tide turning. Revenge had a price, and it was paid in blood. The funeral was a cold, gray affair, held in a small chapel suffocated by rain. Carla stood alone by the casket, the same suit Jimmy had worn the day he died folded on top. The mourners whispered, their eyes sharp with fear and suspicion. Frankie appeared at her side, silent but steady. The priest intoned prayers, but Carla's mind was elsewhere, on vengeance, on loss, on the bloody trail that led here. She recalled Jimmy's last words, his promise to protect her even in death. Tears burned her eyes, but she did not let them fall. Instead, she whispered, I will finish this. Outside, thunder rolled, as if the sky itself mourned. The city waited, watching the bloodlines reckoning unfold in shadow and rain. Carla knew this was no longer just about family. It was war. And she was ready to fight. Carla met with her closest allies in a cramped back room above Vito's bar tower. Maps and photos covered the walls, red pins marking targets. Frankie leaned forward, voice low. Salvatore's men are scattered, but loyal. We hit fast, hit hard. Carla nodded, voice steady despite the weight on her shoulders. No mistakes, no mercy. The plan was brutal, a last desperate attempt to reclaim what was stolen. Outside, the city's pulse quickened with the coming storm. Frankie studied each face, seeing the flicker of fear masked by determination. This ends tonight. For Jimmy, for all of us. Carla's eyes shone with cold fire. We either burn this city down or die trying. The room grew silent as the reality sank in. There was no turning back. The assault began just after midnight. Black SUVs slipped through foggy streets like shadows. Carla led the charge, pistol drawn, eyes sharp. Frankie covered the rear, moving silently through the chaos. The first gunshot cracked the night, shattering windows and nerves. Inside the abandoned mansion, Salvatore's men scrambled, but the surprise was total. Carla shouted, "Clear the rooms, no one escapes." Bullets tore through the silence, the air thick with smoke and desperation. Frankie's voice cut through the chaos, "Move, move!" Carla's heart pounded with adrenaline and dread. This was the moment of reckoning, the final battle between blood and betrayal. The mansion's walls echoed with violence, every breath a gamble for survival. In the mansion's grand hall, Carla faced Salvatore alone, gun raised, eyes burning with fury. Sal sneered, "You think this changes anything?" Carla's voice was ice. "It changes everything." The tension was a live wire, each breath electric. Sal lunged, and a brutal struggle ensued. Fists, gunshots, desperation. Carla's resolve never wavered, even as pain blossomed across her skin. Finally, Sal fell, defeated but defiant. Carla stood over him, voice low and unforgiving. "This is the end of your reign." The Mancinis rise from ashes. Outside, sirens wailed, echoing justice and ruin. The battle was over, but the war was far from done. Carla's eyes were a storm, ready to rebuild or burn everything to the ground. At dawn, Carla stood on the rooftop, overlooking the city, a cold wind whipping her hair. Frankie joined her, silent but present. The streets below were quiet, the storm passed but the aftermath visible in broken windows and fading sirens. Carla whispered, "We survived, but at what cost?" Frankie nodded slowly. "We rebuilt from fire, but the scars stay." Carla's gaze hardened, the weight of leadership settling in. This city doesn't forgive, it never forgets. She turned, voice steady but weary. "I'm not done, not yet." The sun rose, casting long shadows over the skyline, a new day born from darkness. The legacy of blood and vengeance continued, etched into the heart of the city and its most violent enforcer. The city felt colder now, like it had taken a deep breath and exhaled hard. Carla sat alone in the quiet of her apartment, the weight of victory heavy on her shoulders. Jimmy's jacket hung from the back of her chair, a silent reminder of all that was lost. She traced the fabric absently, her mind replaying the last fight, the faces of friends who didn't make it. Frankie had left hours ago, promising to watch her back, but silence filled the room like a third presence. Carla whispered into the dark, "We got what we wanted, but at what cost?" Her voice cracked under the weight of unsaid things, the lies, the betrayals, the blood that stained everything. Outside, the rain began to fall softly, the city's tears mingling with hers. The price of silence was never cheap. It was a debt paid in scars no one saw, and a loneliness that only grew deeper with each passing night. Detective Harris stared out over the city skyline from his cramped office. The case was closed on paper, but the weight lingered like smoke. He rubbed his eyes and sighed. "Justice is never clean," he muttered. Lisa Gomez sat nearby, scanning reports with a weary expression. "We took down Salvatore Leone, but the corruption runs deeper." Harris nodded grimly. "The system feeds on silence, and every whisper comes with a price." Outside, the city lights flickered under a hazy sky. Harris's phone buzzed, another tip, another thread unraveling. He clenched his fists, ready to keep chasing ghosts, knowing the war wasn't over. The streets might sleep, but the fight never truly ended. And Harris would be there in the shadows, until the silence broke. Carla visited her mother's house for the first time in weeks. Maria Mancini's frail hands trembled as she offered tea, eyes soft with pain and pride. Carla sat beside her, silent at first, letting the quiet fill the room. "He wanted you to be strong," Maria said softly, voice cracking. Carla nodded, swallowing hard. "I am, but it's hard to live with all this." The room smelled of old wood and fading roses. Outside, autumn leaves drifted past the window, a stark contrast to the storm inside. They shared a fragile moment, two women bound by loss and love, learning how to carry grief without breaking. Carla knew the path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in months, she felt a flicker of peace. Sometimes survival was its own kind of victory. Frankie sat alone on a park bench under the gray sky, cigarette glowing faintly in the cold air. Memories of the past weeks pressed down on him like the weight of the city itself. He thought of Jimmy, Carla, the friends lost to violence and betrayal. Frankie whispered to the wind, "We did what we had to do." But the victory tasted bitter, hollow. He flicked the cigarette into the mud and stood slowly, resolve hardening. There was no going back to the life they'd known. The streets were quieter now, but the ghosts remained, haunting reminders of the price paid for loyalty and survival. Frankie pulled his coat tight and disappeared into the fog, a soldier forever marked by war. Carla stood on the rooftop at night, the city sprawled beneath her like a living beast. The wind tugged at her coat, and she closed her eyes, breathing in the cold air. "There's no retirement plan for ghosts," she whispered, a final truth. The streets had taken everything and given her a crown forged in blood. The legacy of pain, loyalty, and violence was hers to bear. But with it came power, and a new kind of freedom. Carla opened her eyes, steel hard, ready to face whatever came next. The city lights flickered below, 1,000 lives intertwined with hers in ways she couldn't undo. Tonight, the past was behind her, but the future waited, dark, uncertain, and hers to command. The city's skyline shimmered under a crescent moon, silent and indifferent to the war fought beneath its shadow. Carla stood by the window of her new apartment, the skyline reflected in her dark eyes. The ghosts of the past clung tightly, the memories of blood spilled, promises broken. She traced the jagged scar on her wrist, a reminder of the night that changed everything. Her voice was barely a whisper. "We all carry ghosts. Some live in the shadows, some in our hearts." Outside, distant sirens echoed faintly, a lullaby for those who had lost too much. Carla turned away from the window, stepping into the quiet, her face hard, yet serene. The city slept, but she remained awake, watching, waiting. Her legacy was etched in fire and silence, and she was ready to carry it alone. Detective Harris walked the rain-soaked streets alone, the weight of the case still heavy on his mind. He glanced up at flickering street lamps, their light struggling against the fog. Justice, he muttered, is never absolute. It's a balance of light and dark. He pulled his collar tighter against the cold and paused by a crumpled newspaper clipping pinned to a bulletin board. Jimmy Russo's face stared back at him. Harris clenched his fists, knowing some battles were won only in silence. His eyes scanned the empty streets, the ghosts of those lost lurking in every shadow. The city breathed around him, dirty, dangerous, but alive. Harris exhaled slowly. This story never ends. Carla visited the neglected gravesite where Jimmy was laid to rest. She knelt, fingers brushing cold stone, her eyes searching the weathered engraving. "You were more than a soldier," she whispered, voice breaking. "You were my brother." The wind rustled fallen leaves, carrying the scent of earth and rain. She placed a single white lily on the grave and stood, shoulders squared against the chill. Carla felt the past's weight lift slightly, replaced by a fragile hope. The war had cost her everything, but in that silence, she found something like peace. The city's chaos continued, but here, in this quiet corner, the bloodshed faded into memory. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to breathe. Frankie stood at the docks, watching the sunrise cut through morning fog. His coat pulled tight, face weathered and distant. The city behind him seemed both familiar and foreign, a place of lost friends and broken promises. He lit a cigarette, the flame briefly illuminating his worn features. "We did what we had to do," he murmured. But the fight had changed him, marked him forever. As the waves crashed against the pier, Frankie knew some scars ran too deep for healing. Yet beneath the weight of memory, a flicker of resolve remained. The future was uncertain, but the past was a story told in blood, and he was one of its survivors. As night deepened, Carla stood on the rooftop once more, city lights twinkling like distant stars. Her breath clouded in the cold air, a silent testament to survival and strength. "The streets will remember," she whispered, voice steady. "Not for the blood, but for the ones who dared to fight." The wind caught her coat, flinging it wide as she faced the endless cityscape, no longer a victim, but its fierce protector. The dark legacy of violence and loyalty had forged her, tempered by loss. But as the city breathed beneath her feet, Carla knew this was only the beginning. Her story, intertwined with the shadows, would echo through the streets long after the lights went out.